My office tomorrow, 7 p.m. Don't make me wait. Alaric, she didn't respond. The next evening, she stood in the elevator of Alaric Voss's building with her arms folded loosely across her middle, heart steady but alert. She told herself she was here because curiosity had finally outweighed caution. Because unanswered questions had a way of pressing too close to the ribs. At exactly 7, the doors opened. His office was lit softly, city lights spilling through the tall windows. Alaric stood near the desk, jacket off, sleeves buttoned, as composed as if he'd been waiting far longer than a minute. "You came," he said. "You told me to," Selma replied. A faint smile touched his mouth. "I told you not to be late." She didn't sit when he gestured to the chairs. "This isn't about work," she said. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He moved then. Not closer, not yet, but enough to shift the space between them. His presence felt deliberate, measured, like he was holding something back on purpose. "I asked you here because I don't enjoy unfinished conversations," Alaric said, "and because what I want to propose deserves to be spoken plainly." She raised an eyebrow. "You're proposing something now." "Dinner," he said simply. The word landed softer than she expected. She let out a quiet breath. "You summoned me to your office to ask me out?" "I summoned you," he said, unbothered, "because you wouldn't have come otherwise." "That's not reassuring." "No," he agreed again, "but it's honest." Silence stretched, thick, not awkward. The city hummed below them, distant and unaware. "Why?" Selma asked. Alaric's gaze held hers unflinching. "Because you intrigue me. Because I prefer intention over ambiguity. And because I would rather you see me clearly before you decide anything at all." Her fingers tightened at her sides. "And if I say no?" "Then I accept it," he said. "But this won't necessarily stop either. I may take a step back, but you'll come to me soon enough." She searched his face for deception and found none. Only patience, and something sharper beneath it, carefully leashed. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow evening," he said. "I'll pick you up." "One date," she said. "One," he echoed. She turned to leave. "Selma," he said. She paused, hand on the door. "This isn't a command," Alaric said quietly. "It's an invitation." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She left with the city lights still burning behind her, and the distinct feeling that something had already begun moving, whether she stepped forward or not. The next evening arrived without ceremony. Selma was halfway through checking the time for the 3rd time when headlights washed over the front of her building. A black car idled at the curb, polished enough to reflect the streetlights in clean, unbroken lines. The driver stepped out before she reached the sidewalk, opening the rear door without a word. Inside, the interior smelled faintly of leather and something sharper beneath it. Clean, expensive, unfamiliar. Alaric sat opposite her, already there, dark suit immaculate, posture relaxed in a way that suggested he'd never known discomfort. "You're punctual," he said as the door closed. "You said tomorrow evening," Selma replied. "Not an hour window." His mouth curved slightly. "Good." The car pulled away smoothly, city blurring past the tinted windows. She waited for him to speak first. Instead, he watched her, not openly, not rudely, but with the kind of focus that made her aware of every small movement she made. When she shifted, he noticed. When she crossed her legs, his gaze followed and then lifted, deliberately, back to her face. "You look different tonight," he said at last. She frowned. "Different how?" "Decided," he answered. She didn't confirm or deny it. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere quiet," Alaric said. "Somewhere I can finish explaining myself." "That sounds ominous." "It's only ominous if you assume the worst." The car slowed, then turned. The city thinned around them, buildings giving way to darker streets and taller iron gates. The restaurant, when they arrived, was understated. No sign, no line, no noise spilling into the street. The kind of place that didn't need to advertise because the people who belonged there already knew. Dinner unfolded like a performance rehearsed just for her. Alaric ordered without looking at the menu, but he asked her preferences first and adjusted accordingly. He listened when she spoke, not interrupting, not steering the conversation unless it drifted toward safer ground. When she laughed, it surprised him. "You don't do this often," Selma said halfway through the meal. "Do what?" "Let someone see you like this." He considered her over the rim of his glass. "No." "Why me?" The question lingered longer this time. "Because you don't flinch when things stop being simple, you stand your ground. I need someone strong in my world. The wilting flower or awkwardly comedic girl are only good in romantic comedies or teenage romance novels." Her fork paused midair. "Is that what this is?" she asked. "Not simple?" His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something deeper, heavier. "It will be," he said. "Soon." They left after dessert, the night cooler now, the city quieter. The car was waiting again, engine humming softly as she slid into the seat. She noticed then that they weren't heading back toward her apartment. "Alaric," she said slowly, "you said dinner." "I did," he replied. "I didn't say it would end there." The car turned onto a long private drive, lights lining the path like a constellation pulled down to earth. Ahead, his home rose from the darkness, modern lines, glass and stone, illuminated but secluded. The car stopped. The door opened. Alaric stepped out and offered his hand. "Come inside," he said. "I owe you the truth." Her pulse thudded once, hard. She hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. The door closed behind them with a muted, deliberate sound. Selma noticed it immediately, not because it was loud, but because it sealed the space in a way that made the outside world vanish. Alaric didn't touch her as he led her inside. The house opened around them like a stage. He poured wine without asking, handing her a glass before she realized she had accepted it. When his fingers brushed hers briefly, it was measured, not lingering, but enough to leave warmth behind. "You said you'd explain yourself," Selma said, watching him over the rim of her glass. "I will," he replied, leaning against the counter across from her, cuffs buttoned perfectly, sleeves straight. "But not all at once. Not yet." A quiet, charged silence settled. Not empty, heavy, deliberate. "There are things about me," Alaric said, "that don't translate well outside context. Once spoken aloud, they can't be taken back." "Try me," she said. His gaze sharpened. "You've noticed things," he said, "about me, about how others respond, about how you respond." Her pulse thumped. She didn't deny it. "You felt it the night we met," Alaric continued, voice low. "Not simple attraction, recognition, understanding." Her breath caught, though she didn't move. He stepped closer, deliberately, slowly enough to allow retreat. She didn't. "The truth," he said quietly, "is that I am not what you think I am." The air seemed to thicken. Lights dimmed ever so slightly, bending around him as though the room itself acknowledged his presence. Reflections in the glass flickered just beyond normal, his outline stretching for the briefest moment before resuming clarity. Selma's heartbeat quickened. "What are you?" she asked. Alaric inhaled, measured, controlled. "My kind has lived alongside yours for centuries," he said, "adapting, blending, wearing the forms your world rewards. We survive on connection, on desire, on energy humans barely understand but constantly give away." And then, "I am an incubus," he said. Her fingers curled against the counter edge. The words landed like ice. "But before you assume anything," he continued, eyes never leaving hers, "I have never taken without consent. That includes you." Selma's thoughts scrambled, logic wrestling instinct, but his calm presence forced her to listen. "Then why me?" she asked, voice sharp, trembling only slightly. "Because when my kind finds a mate..." His hand lifted, hovering just short of her cheek, deliberate, commanding attention without contact. We act with certainty. Her pulse surged. She felt the pull in her chest, subtle but undeniable, like gravity had shifted. He didn't need to touch her. The space itself leaned toward him, bending her awareness. "You will understand soon," he murmured. "Everything that comes next. You will not be able to ignore it." Selma didn't step back. She didn't resist. She could feel the thread of something inescapable weaving between them, yet it wasn't complete, not yet. And even as fear and fascination tangled in her chest, she knew one thing: she was already caught in his orbit. The house felt smaller now, though the ceilings were high and the glass walls stretched the city into infinity. Every surface, every shadow seemed to watch her. Selma realized she wasn't just in his home, she was in his presence, and that presence had weight. Alaric moved closer, closing the distance in a way that left no room for hesitation. He didn't speak at first, only letting his gaze sweep over her. She could feel it in her chest, in the hollow of her throat, a subtle tug that made her pulse stutter. "You've felt it already," he murmured, voice low, threading warmth through the air. "The way my kind connects, the way we recognize each other. You can't ignore it, not for long." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, just a whisper away, and the room seemed to bend subtly around him, lights flickering as if acknowledging him. Every instinct in her screamed caution, but some deeper part of her, one she didn't understand, pulled toward him anyway. Alaric's hand lifted, hovering near her jaw. The air shimmered faintly, a dim glow curling between them, not harsh but inviting. "You will feel me," he said, voice steady, deliberate, "and in that, you will understand. You cannot fight it. You shouldn't." Before she could respond, a pulse of energy rippled through the space. It wasn't violent, but it wrapped around her, threading through her chest and limbs like a current. Her knees weakened slightly. She swayed, but his presence anchored her. "You're safe," he said softly, sensing her hesitation. "But you will feel me. You will know." And then, as though a switch had flipped, the connection tightened. The glow between them pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Her vision blurred faintly and the room seemed to fall away. She realized, almost too late, that she could feel his energy entwining with hers. Not just near her, inside her, drawing and weaving, locking her awareness with his. Selma gasped. Her chest heaved. She wanted to pull back, to protest, but the pull was relentless, irresistible. He leaned slightly closer, not pressing, not needing to. His aura alone held her. "You cannot fight it," he whispered, just above her lips. "You won't want to. Not after tonight." Her knees threatened to buckle, her fingers clenched at her sides, but he didn't need to hold her. She was already caught. The connection was intimate, consuming, spiritual, and it left no doubt. She was bound to him in ways she didn't yet understand. Alaric's eyes glimmered in the dim light, a predator's calm, overlaid with something almost reverent. "Rest," he said softly. "And when the morning comes, you will understand part of what it means to be with me." Selma's mind swirled. Fear, desire, confusion, and a thread of something darker, the inescapable pull of him, intertwined. She sank to a chair, trembling, and he simply watched, allowing her to feel the weight of the bond, the inevitability of what had begun. The connection lingered even as he finally stepped back, giving her just enough space to breathe. Yet she knew instinctively it was only the beginning. The night air outside the hospital was cool, almost sharp. Gregory leaned against the brick wall near the employee entrance, paper cup of coffee warming his hands as he stared at nothing in particular. His shift had ended late, his thoughts tangled and restless in a way he couldn't quite explain. Then the light above the doorway flickered. Once, twice. Gregory frowned and straightened. "Great," he muttered. "Of course." "That fixture was replaced last week." Alaric's voice came from behind him. Calm, measured, too close. Gregory spun around. Alaric Voss stood a few feet away, hands relaxed at his sides, dressed impeccably as always, as though he belonged anywhere he decided to stand. No footsteps, no warning, just there. Gregory's pulse spiked. Jesus, he caught himself, heart hammering. Where the hell did you come from? Alaric inclined his head slightly, almost polite. I walked. No, Gregory said immediately. You didn't. The light flickered again. Gregory noticed, distantly, that the night had gone unnaturally quiet. No cars passing, no distant sirens, no hum of the city he was used to. It was like the world had taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. Alaric studied him, blue eyes cool and assessing. You're observant. That will serve you well. Gregory swallowed. You don't just show up behind people without a sound, he said carefully. And you don't kill the ambient noise just by standing there. Alaric's mouth curved faintly. Not a smile. An acknowledgement. You asked where I came from, he said. The answer wouldn't satisfy you. Gregory's grip tightened on the cup. Then answer a better question. He hesitated, then pushed through. Is Selma in danger? That finally shifted something. Alaric didn't bristle. He didn't grow angry. But the air around them tightened, like pressure deep underwater. No, Alaric said. She is safer than she has ever been. Gregory let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then stiffened. That's not reassuring coming from you. Alaric regarded him for a long moment. Then, deliberately, he raised one hand. The streetlight above them dimmed, not out but bending, its glow warping slightly, stretching toward Alaric's fingers like it recognized him. The shadows at his feet moved out of sync with his body. Gregory stepped back instinctively. Okay, he said hoarsely. Okay, that's not normal. No, Alaric agreed. It isn't. What are you? Gregory asked quietly. Alaric considered the question. Something old, he said at last. Something that has learned to live carefully among your kind. Gregory shook his head slowly. You're talking like you're not human. I'm not, Alaric said simply. The words landed with a weight that made Gregory's chest tighten. And Selma? Gregory pressed. Does she know what you are? She knows enough, Alaric replied. More than most humans ever will. Gregory's jaw clenched. You're saying this like it's a favor. It is, Alaric said calmly, because I could have left you with fear and questions alone. Instead, I'm answering you. Why? Gregory demanded. Because you care about her, Alaric said, and because you are not a threat. That stung more than Gregory expected. You don't get to decide that. Alaric's gaze sharpened. The shadows twitched. I already have. Gregory forced himself to stay rooted. If you're not human, if you're something else, he hesitated, then pushed through. Does being near you hurt her? No, Alaric said, but being near you will. Gregory blinked. What? She is changing, Alaric explained. Her energy is aligning with mine. That transition is delicate. Emotional strain, confusion, divided loyalties, those things create instability. Humans are fragile during this phase. Gregory stared at him. You're talking about her like she's undergoing some kind of, metamorphosis? Yes. And you think isolating her is protection? I think clarity is protection, Alaric replied. And you complicate that. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Gregory said quietly, You're afraid she'd choose me. For the first time, Alaric didn't answer immediately. Then, no, he said. I'm certain she wouldn't. That certainty was worse than anger. Then why am I here? Gregory asked. Alaric stepped closer, not threatening, not crowding, just close enough that Gregory felt the heat of his presence, the hum beneath reality. Because you would keep trying, Alaric said. And because if you kept trying, you would get hurt. Gregory's voice dropped. By you? By what I am, Alaric corrected, and by what she is becoming. The light above them steadied. The city's distant sounds slowly returned as if released. Alaric stepped back, restoring space. "You will stop contacting her," he said, tone calm, almost kind. "Not forever, but for now, give her room to understand what she has chosen." "And if I don't?" Gregory asked, even though some part of him already knew the answer. Alaric met his gaze steadily. "Then the next conversation will be much shorter." A chill ran through Gregory that had nothing to do with the night air. Alaric inclined his head once more. "Take care, Gregory Hale." Then he turned and walked away, not vanishing, not dissolving into shadow, just walking into the night like a man who had never needed to look back. Gregory stood there long after he was gone, coffee forgotten, heart pounding, knowing one terrible truth with absolute clarity. Selma was not in danger, but she was no longer free in the way Gregory understood freedom at all. Alaric returned without sound. The city lights beyond the windows still burned, but the house itself felt hushed, as though it had been holding its breath. Selma had slumped forward in the living room chair, her body finally giving in to the strain. Her head lolled slightly to one side, lashes resting against her cheeks, breath shallow but steady. Alaric stopped the moment he saw her. For a long second he only watched. Not with hunger, not with triumph. With something sharper and more contained, calculation braided with vigilance. The bond between them hummed faintly, alive and newly forged, tugging at him with a constant awareness of her state. Too much, too fast. He had known it would be. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her, one hand hovering near her pulse without touching. Satisfied, he slid an arm beneath her knees and another behind her shoulders, lifting her easily. She stirred at the change in position, a soft sound escaping her throat, but she didn't wake. "Easy," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. The bedroom was dark, lit only by the ambient glow filtering through tall windows. He laid her carefully on the bed, redressing her in her new nightgown, arranging her as though she might break if mishandled. When he pulled the covers over her, his movements were deliberate, almost reverent. Alaric lay beside her, not touching, not yet. He angled himself slightly, one arm braced on the mattress, his attention fixed on the subtle rise and fall of her chest. The bond pulsed faintly between them, still raw, still settling. He adjusted his breathing to match hers, anchoring her without waking her. This was the part humans never saw. The watchfulness, the restraint, the aftermath of claiming something precious and knowing the cost of every misstep. He did not sleep. Morning arrived quietly. Sunlight spilled across the room in pale gold bands, warming Selma's face enough to pull her slowly back toward consciousness. She stirred, disoriented, her body heavy in a way that felt unfamiliar, dense, charged, as if something inside her had been rewired overnight. She sat up, blinking. The room was not her apartment. Memory returned in fragments. The office, the house, the pull, the overwhelming sense of too much. Her pulse quickened, but panic didn't come. Instead, there was a lingering fog, a softness at the edges of her thoughts that dulled the sharpest fears. She dressed slowly, choosing clothes that felt grounding. It occurred to her that she had been changed but didn't have the strength to worry about it, and followed the faint scent of coffee and something warm and sweet into the main living space. Breakfast waited. Fresh fruit arranged neatly, bread still warm, eggs prepared simply. Tea steamed gently at the place set for her, as though someone had anticipated exactly how she would feel upon waking. Alaric was nowhere in sight. Victor stood near the window, posture composed, hands folded behind his back. He turned as she entered, expression calm and unreadable but not unkind. "Good morning, Selma Rayan," he said. "Please eat. You'll need it." "Where is he?" she asked, voice hoarse. "In his study," Victor replied. "A matter requiring immediate attention. He asked that I speak with you in the meantime." Selma hesitated, then sat. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around the teacup. About what? Victor moved to the chair across from her but did not sit. About what you are experiencing and why. She nodded once. I feel strange. That is expected. He waited until she had taken a few bites before continuing, as if pacing the truth mattered. What Alaric did last night was not impulse, Victor said. It was instinct. When one of our kind recognizes a mate, delay becomes dangerous, not for us, for the human. Selma looked up sharply. Dangerous how? You are fragile, he said plainly, not cruelly. Not weak. Fragile. Time, stress, emotional conflict, those things erode you. If our kind attaches to a human, these become concerns. We'll become overly protective, taking out any threat that may put you at risk. The bond accelerates changes meant to preserve you. You're kind, she repeated. So you're one too? Yes, Victor stated kindly. Okay, but what do you mean by preserves me? She echoed. You will age differently now, slowly, if at all. You will heal faster. You will become more resilient. But the transition leaves you vulnerable at first. That is why Alaric acted with urgency. Her stomach tightened. And Gregory? Victor's gaze sharpened a fraction. Gregory Hale is important to you. That mattered. It also complicated things. You scared him, Selma said quietly. No, Victor corrected. Alaric clarified boundaries. Gregory is unharmed. He will be distant for a time. That is intentional. She swallowed. He didn't deserve that. Perhaps not, Victor allowed. But neither did you deserve to be torn between worlds during a transformation. Selma pushed her plate away, appetite faltering. My apartment... Your lease has been terminated, Victor said smoothly. Arrangements were made. Your belongings are being transported here as we speak. They will be stored in the garage. You will decide what stays. Her breath caught. I didn't agree to that. No, Victor said, but you would have eventually. This is not coercion. It is inevitability. She felt the bond respond to his words, a quiet affirmation in her chest that unsettled her more than fear would have. And if I don't want this, she asked. Victor regarded her carefully. Then you will want it later. Or you will leave, and he will find you. The honesty was disarming. I am sworn to your protection, Victor continued. When Alaric is absent, I stand in his place. That is not a threat. It is a promise. Selma leaned back in her chair, exhaustion washing over her again. The fight she imagined herself having simply wasn't there. Maybe it would come later. Maybe not. For now, she understood enough to know resistance would be meaningless. She closed her eyes briefly. Somewhere deeper in the house, a door opened. Alaric was coming back, and the bond, newly forged and still settling, stirred in anticipation, returning to the dining room as if he had never left it. Selma felt him before she saw him. A shift in the air, a quiet pressure that settled behind her ribs and steadied the unmoored sensation in her limbs. She turned from the window slowly, wary but no longer panicked. The fog in her thoughts remained, but it had softened, like pain dulled to something manageable. You're standing again, he said. I needed to, she replied. If I sat, I wasn't sure I'd get back up. His mouth curved faintly, not amused, not displeased. You will? Just not yet without effort. He simply sat, giving her space that felt deliberate rather than generous. You're feeling the bond asserting itself, he continued. Not incomplete. Unsettled. That doesn't sound better, Selma said. It is, he replied calmly. An incomplete bond would tear at you. This one is simply insistent. She folded her arms, grounding herself. Victor didn't say any of this. No, Alaric said. Victor explains mechanics. I explain consequences. Her pulse ticked faster at that. What happens next? She asked. Alaric met her gaze without flinching. Your body will continue to adjust. Your senses will sharpen. Your emotions will become more responsive, especially to me." She swallowed. "And if I resist?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intimacy that made her skin prickle. "You already are," he said, "and you're already losing." That should have frightened her. Instead, it unsettled her in a different way because some part of her recognized the truth in it. "I won't force you," Alaric continued, voice smooth, measured. "I don't need to. Desire does the work for me. It always has." Her breath caught. "That sounds like a threat." "It's a promise," he corrected, "and a courtesy. I want you to understand what's happening to you, even if you cannot stop it." He stepped closer, not crowding, not trapping her, close enough that the warmth of him reached her skin. The bond stirred in response, a low, aching pull that made her knees weaken. "To stabilize you," he said quietly, "we will mate." The word landed like a bell struck underwater, distant, resonant, impossible to ignore. Selma's fingers curled against her sleeve. "You're saying that like it's inevitable?" "It is," he said gently. "Sooner or later." She searched his face, looking for something monstrous, something grotesque. Instead, she found the same beauty that had unsettled her from the beginning. Sharpened now, edges more pronounced, gaze brighter than it had any right to be. He let her see just enough, showing himself because he knew she was asking without her saying anything. His canines lengthened slightly. Elegant, predatory. His nails darkened, sharpening into claws that gleamed faintly before he reined them back. His eyes held hers, luminous with something old and watchful. "This is all you'll ever see unless you ask for more," he said. "I won't frighten you into obedience." Her voice came out unsteady. "You don't have to." "I know." She hesitated, then lifted her hand. "May I?" He nodded once. Her fingers brushed his hand, tracing the faint ridge where claw met skin. Warm, solid, controlled. He inhaled slowly, deliberately steadying himself. And that restraint affected her more than any display of power could have. "You feed on desire," she said, gathering courage. "On hunger. Greed." "Yes." "And me?" "With you," he said, "there is no need to hunt. A human partner produces more than enough on her own, especially once bonded. You will never be fully drained, tired from time to time." "And other women?" "There will be none," he said without pause. "If you had been a succubus, the female version of us, we would hunt together. You would give me permission for feeding, you would join. But as you are, there is no reason to go outside for that." She hesitated, then asked the question she hadn't wanted to voice. "Devere?" His jaw tightened, the first crack in his composure. "You rejected me," he said simply. "My instincts demanded release. She offered herself. I accepted. It meant nothing beyond that moment." "That doesn't make it okay," Selma said. "No," he agreed, "but there was no commitment either, if I recall." Silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Finally, she asked quietly, "So what happens now?" Alaric stepped closer, the bond responding instantly, heat blooming low in her stomach, her breath catching against her will. "Now," he said softly, "I court you. I seduce you. I let your body come to the same conclusion your mind is still fighting." His gaze held hers unwavering. "I want you happy," he said. "I want you safe. And I want you to accept what you are becoming with as little suffering as possible." The bond pulsed between them, warm and insistent, already answering for her. Selma closed her eyes just for a moment. When she opened them again, she knew one terrible, undeniable truth. She had chosen the moment she accepted his invitation, pretending it had to do with just money, pretending it had to do with protecting her peace. But the fact was, she had been truly drawn to him from the beginning. Part of her felt guilty for it because she knew how Gregory felt about her, but couldn't find it within herself to return the feelings completely. He was always a maybe, but with Alaric, he was a definite. Selma noticed Gregory's absence before she admitted what it meant. Her phone remained untouched on the counter where she'd set it the night before. No message, no apology for being busy, no tired joke, just quiet. The bond stirred at the edge of her awareness, warm and faintly pleased. Alaric said nothing about it. He moved through the house with the calm of someone who knew exactly how the day would unfold. Breakfast appeared without ceremony every day. Thoughtful, familiar choices he had no reasonable way of knowing she preferred. The normalcy unsettled her more than any overt pressure could have. "You didn't ask if I slept," she said finally. "I watched," he replied simply. She paused, then nodded. Somehow that answer felt less intrusive than it should have. "I still feel..." She searched for the word. "Off." "Sensitive," he corrected gently. "Unanchored. That will pass once we mate." The bond responded instantly, heat blooming low in her stomach, her breath catching. She turned away, bracing herself against the table. "You talk about this like it's biology," she said. "It is," Alaric replied, instinct refined by centuries of restraint. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. The pull was already there, tightening with every measured breath. "You're not giving me a choice," Selma said quietly. "I am," he said. She laughed softly, humorless. "You're infuriating." "Yes," he agreed, "but effective." That night, the house seemed to draw closer around them. Not oppressive, attentive. Alaric poured wine, listened as she spoke, responded when she challenged him. He made her feel seen in a way that felt dangerous precisely because it was sincere. When she stood, restless, he followed at a respectful distance. "Do you think we're truly compatible? Are your instincts sure?" Alaric didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed on her, searching, as if measuring something deeper than words. "You don't dissolve around power," he said at last. "You don't worship it. You don't crave it." Her brow furrowed. "Most humans do," he continued. "They offer themselves long before I ask. You didn't." "So that's it?" she challenged. "No," he said quietly. "It's why I noticed you." He stepped closer, voice lowering. "What bound us was instinct, recognition. Something in you answered something in me before either of us understood what it meant." Her breath hitched. "I realized you were already mine, and I love you," he finally stated. Word he had never said to anyone in the centuries he had lived. She felt it then, the betrayal of her own body. The ache, the pull, the way standing near him felt like relief. "You could make this easier," she said. "I could," he agreed. "But then you'd doubt yourself later." He stepped closer, close enough that the bond surged, her knees weakening. She reached out instinctively, fingers curling into his jacket. "I don't want to hurt," she whispered. "I won't let you," he said, realizing what she meant, what she had gone through. She tilted her head up, finding restraint and desire held carefully in check. That broke her. "Please," she said. His hands came to her waist, firm, grounding, the bond flooding through her in a rush that stole her breath. The sensation wasn't overwhelming. It was right, settling into place as though her body had been waiting for this alignment all along. Later, time blurred, softened, their bodies mingled, both feeling immense and unrestrained pleasure. She lay curled against him, heart racing, thoughts slow and distant. The world felt quieter and far more peaceful after. "You're safe now," Alaric murmured, fingers tracing slow patterns at her back. She believed him. That was the most frightening part. Gregory's days got better in ways that didn't make sense. It started small. A resident complimented his notes, unprompted. A nurse asked his opinion instead of correcting him. Dr. Bernstein, who usually spoke in clipped efficiency, paused during rounds and said, "Good catch," before moving on like it was nothing. By the end of the week, it had happened 3 more times. He should have been relieved. Instead, the improvement sat wrong in his chest, like a symptom without a diagnosis. Selma hadn't called. He checked his phone more than he wanted to admit. Once in the morning, then again during lunch, then late at night when the apartment felt too quiet. He drafted texts he never sent. "You okay?" sounded intrusive. A "miss you" felt dangerous. Something had shifted and he didn't know where he fit anymore. At work, things kept escalating positively. He was pulled aside after a particularly brutal shift and told his patient interactions were exceptional. A senior attending recommended him for an early research opportunity. His schedule lightened without explanation, as if invisible hands were clearing obstacles in his path. Anyone else would have called it luck. Gregory didn't believe in luck. The realization came one evening as he sat alone on his couch, half-eaten takeout cooling on the table. He replayed the last few weeks in his head. Selma's exhaustion, her silence, Alaric's sudden appearance, the way the air had felt wrong around him. Selma hadn't disappeared. She had stepped aside, not out of fear, out of calculation. "She gave herself up," Gregory said aloud, the words sounding foreign and heavy, "to stop this from touching me." The thought made his chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with romance. Selma had always been like that, absorbing damage so others didn't have to. He'd just never realized how literal it could become. The knock at the door came without warning a few hours later. Gregory froze. Every instinct told him exactly who it was. He opened the door slowly. Alaric Voss stood in the hallway, dressed simply this time, dark coat, no pretense of formality. The building's lights hummed overhead, steady, obedient. "May I come in?" Alaric asked. Gregory swallowed. "You already know the answer." "Yes," Alaric agreed, "but courtesy matters." Gregory stepped aside. Alaric entered without touching anything, without looking around. He remained standing, hands relaxed at his sides. "I assume you've noticed the changes," Alaric said. Gregory folded his arms, grounding himself. "Yeah, I have." "And you've deduced why." Gregory met his gaze. Selma made a choice. "She did." "To protect me." Alaric didn't deny it. "Among other reasons." Silence stretched, thick but not theatrical. "So what now?" Gregory asked. "You here to finish scaring me off?" Alaric considered him carefully. "No, I'm here to define terms." Gregory laughed under his breath. "You really do think this is a negotiation?" "It is," Alaric said calmly. "One you are not in a position to win." Gregory straightened. "Then say what you came to say." Alaric nodded once. "As long as you maintain a safe distance from Selma, emotionally and physically, you may remain in her life. Limited contact, no dependency, no persuasion. And if I don't? Your career will unravel," Alaric said evenly. "Quietly at first. Opportunities will vanish. Doubts will follow you. Eventually, so will the consequences." Gregory's jaw tightened. "You're threatening me." "Yes. At least you're honest." "I prefer clarity." Gregory took a breath. "And if I do what you want?" Alaric's tone softened, not kind, but measured. "You will excel. Doors will open. You will have the life you've worked for." Gregory shook his head slowly. "You're buying my silence." "No," Alaric corrected. "I'm rewarding your restraint." "And Selma?" Gregory asked, voice tight. "What happens to her?" Alaric's eyes darkened just slightly. "She will be protected. She will never be harmed. And she will never belong to anyone else." Gregory's hands clenched at his sides. "If she asks me to help her leave?" Alaric stepped closer. The temperature dropped. Not dramatically, just enough. "If you try to take her from me," Alaric said quietly, "I will dismantle everything you love, and if that does not dissuade you, I will end you." There was no anger in his voice, no flourish, just a statement. Gregory felt the weight of it settle into his bones. "You won't need to," Gregory said after a long moment. "She wouldn't ask me." Alaric watched him carefully. "You're certain?" "She chose," Gregory said. "And knowing Selma, she'd rather live with the cost than let it spill onto anyone else." Alaric studied him for a beat longer, then inclined his head. "That is why you're still standing." He turned toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth," Alaric added, "you would have been a problem in another life." Gregory huffed a weak laugh. "Lucky me." Alaric left without another word. Gregory stood alone in his apartment, heart racing, the reality finally settling in. Selma was gone, not lost, not kidnapped. She had chosen a different gravity, and Gregory for the first time understood that loving someone sometimes meant letting them go, not because you were afraid, but because staying would destroy you both. He knew now that there weren't just humans in the world anymore, that the fairy tales and legends were true, and that the princess sometimes got taken away by the monster. The fitting room was quiet in the way expensive spaces always were. Thick walls, softened light, sound absorbed before it could echo. Everything was cream and pale gold, clean lines, careful symmetry. Nothing here asked permission to exist. Selma stood on the edge of a low velvet platform while two women adjusted fabric around her waist. Their movements were efficient, practiced, respectful without warmth. They spoke only when necessary, murmuring measurements and confirmations. She felt none of it. Her body responded automatically, arms lifting when asked, shoulders relaxing when guided, but her awareness hovered somewhere above, slightly behind, as if she were watching the scene through glass. Alaric sat several feet away in a lounge chair that looked more like sculpture than furniture. One leg crossed neatly over the other, hands relaxed, posture composed. He wasn't watching the seamstresses. He was watching her. She could feel that attention like pressure between her shoulder blades. "Does it feel tight here?" one of the women asked, adjusting the bodice. Selma blinked. "I think so. No. Maybe." She frowned, frustrated by her own uncertainty. "Sorry." The woman smiled politely. "That's all right. Take your time." Time didn't feel real. The mirror in front of her reflected a woman she recognized but didn't quite inhabit, hair pinned up, skin pale under the lights, fabric draped in a way that suggested permanence. She looked composed. She looked inevitable. She didn't look like someone making a decision. Her chest tightened, a faint wave of nausea rolling through her. Not fear. Something closer to vertigo. "I feel strange," Selma said quietly. Alaric stood immediately. The seamstresses paused without being told, stepping back as he approached. He didn't touch Selma at first. He crouched slightly so they were eye level. "Describe it," he said calmly. She searched for words. "Like I'm not fully here. Like this is happening to someone else and I'm borrowing her body." He nodded once. Dissociation. That word made it feel too clinical, too ordinary. She swallowed. "Is that normal?" "For humans in situations where choice becomes abstract," he said. "Yes." Selma realized they were still standing in front of the two seamstresses. "We're in front of..." Alaric grinned. He wanted to laugh because she looked so distressed. "You don't need to worry about them. They are aware of our kind and are paid well enough not to speak. You will find that our presence is known in certain places and circles you wouldn't expect. Of course, never just outright say anything incriminating without me telling you whether or not it's safe." The seamstresses continued their work unbothered. He rested his hand lightly over hers, warm, grounding. The contact sent a subtle pulse through her, enough to draw her focus back into her skin. The room sharpened slightly. The fabric felt real again. "You're not being rushed," Alaric said. "This isn't a trap." "It feels like one," she replied honestly. He didn't argue. "It would. Your life is narrowing. Humans struggle when paths close." She glanced at the mirror again. "What if I wake up one day and realize I didn't want this?" Alaric held her gaze. "Then you will still be safe, still provided for, still protected but still caged. But that isn't going to happen. Once your life entwines with mine fully, we will follow the rhythm all married couples do, content ones anyway. I hope you're right. I am. I suppose like all humans, you're wondering what will happen to your soul. Selma nodded. Religion is very narrow in its explanation of things. Regular humans have a hard time accepting more than what they see. Believe it or not, we are not all evil. And just like humans, there are many versions of us. I will explain it all in more detail later. This is already a big transition for you, but you still have your soul. It doesn't change just because you're with me. In fact, should something happen to you, I would try to go and find your soul to bring it back. That startled Selma. You can do that? Alaric sat back down. But that might be hard since your soul is a pure one. The upper guardians might be reluctant in allowing me to retrieve it. The seamstresses exchanged a brief look, then returned quietly to their work. Selma simply standing there in shock at such a comment, as if he was commenting on the weather. Selma watched their hands move, precise and impersonal. She thought of her apartment, sunlight through cheap blinds, mismatched furniture, Gregory sitting at her table with tea growing cold between his palms. The memory felt distant, like a photograph left in another room. The fitting finished. The women stepped back, satisfied, murmuring approval. Selma stood when asked, the gown heavier than she expected, its weight anchoring her even as her thoughts floated. She felt Alaric's presence behind her as she faced the mirror. "You look beautiful," he said. She didn't respond immediately. "I don't feel like a bride," she said finally. "No," he said softly. "You feel like someone crossing a threshold." Her throat tightened. "And once I cross it?" "There is no returning," he said. "But there is continuity. You won't disappear." She nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it yet. Alaric's hand settled at the small of her back, firm and unmistakably possessive. The bond responded, steady and deep, less urgent now, more settled. The dissociation eased slightly, not gone, but dulled. She exhaled. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "I know," he said. "If you weren't, I'd be concerned." She turned from the mirror, resting her forehead briefly against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, slow and certain. For the first time since the fitting began, she felt fully inside herself. The vows were spoken quietly, no grand declarations, no spectacle. Alaric's voice was steady, controlled. But when he spoke Selma's name, something beneath the surface shifted, something possessive, unmistakable. Selma's own words trembled only once. She didn't promise forever. She promised truth, presence, continuance. It felt safer to promise what she understood. Alaric's hand closed around hers, firm, grounding. She did not pull away. The reception unfolded in measured elegance. Selma moved through it with a polite smile, accepting congratulations that felt rehearsed, eyes that lingered just a fraction too long. Some guests warmed to her quickly, those who understood power before prejudice. Others kept their distance. Evelyn remained close, attentive in a way that felt less supportive than supervisory. "You're doing well," Evelyn murmured at one point. Selma glanced at her. "Am I?" Evelyn's eyes flicked briefly toward Alaric across the room, then back. "You're still standing. That counts for something." Selma took a sip of champagne she didn't taste. She saw him by accident. Through the tall windows, beyond the garden, across the street where the city resumed its ordinary rhythm. Gregory stood near a lamppost, hands in his coat pockets, posture relaxed but alert. He wasn't dressed for a wedding. He wasn't trying to blend in. He looked like a man passing through a place he no longer belonged to. Their eyes met. Time narrowed. For a moment, Selma felt the memories tug at her. Sitting at her kitchen table, laughing over tea, being known without performance. Gregory didn't smile. He nodded, not in greeting, in acknowledgement. She felt tears sting her eyes, quick, unwelcome. Alaric shifted beside her. Not abruptly, not forcefully. His arm slipped around her waist, pulling her back into him, his chin brushing her temple. The contact was intimate, proprietary, gentle. "Breathe," he murmured. so softly only she could hear. The bond pulsed, steadying her. When she looked again, Gregory was already turning away. He didn't look back. He walked down the street at an unhurried pace, shoulders squared, steps confident. A man with a future unfolding cleanly in front of him. A life unshadowed. A success earned without bargains he didn't understand. But Selma knew, because some things linger no matter how well buried, that she would always be there with him, quietly. In choices, in comparisons, in moments of silence. And Gregory would carry her the same way. Gregory disappeared into the flow of the city, swallowed by headlights and distance, until Selma could no longer tell where he had gone, only that he was gone. The space he left behind lingered. Alaric did not rush to fill it. His arm remained around her waist, steady and unyielding, the contact neither possessive nor indulgent. Simply there, a reminder of what anchored her now. "You're still holding your breath," he murmured. She hadn't realized she was. Selma exhaled slowly, her back settling more fully against his chest. The room resumed its motion, voices, music, the low hum of celebration. But it all felt distant, secondary. The bond between them pulsed softly, no longer urgent, no longer demanding, just present, constant. "He's going to be okay," she said, more to herself than to him. "Yes," Alaric replied, "because you stepped aside when it mattered." She turned slightly, looking up at him. "And what did I step into?" Alaric's gaze darkened, not with threat, but with something heavier. Hunger restrained by intention, devotion sharpened by control. "Me?" he said simply. "This." His hand slid from her waist to her lower back, fingers spreading, grounding her. The touch sent a familiar warmth through her, deeper now, less overwhelming than before. She could feel him everywhere, not as pressure, but as alignment, like her body had finally accepted the truth her mind had resisted. "I don't feel triumphant," she admitted. "You wouldn't," he said. "That emotion belongs to conquerors, not to those who will live past them." She studied his face, the beauty that no longer distracted her from the danger beneath it, the patience, the certainty, the way the room subtly bent around him without his awareness. She rested her forehead against his shoulder, allowing herself that small surrender. Not because she was weak, but because resisting no longer served her. "I don't feel like the same person," she said quietly. "No," Alaric agreed, his hand sliding up to cradle the back of her neck, thumb brushing her pulse. "You are not." His touch lingered there, intimate but controlled, as though reminding her that everything she was becoming was being witnessed. The music swelled, guests turned toward them. Applause rose. Alaric drew her closer, guiding her forward into the light, into the role she now inhabited. Selma lifted her head. She did not smile for the room. She did not look back. She stepped with him, held securely in the arm of something ancient, dangerous, and unwavering, aware finally that love did not always feel like warmth. Sometimes it felt like gravity, and she had stopped fighting the fall. Alaric stopped just before they entered the car. "I forgot to end the contest, didn't I?" Selma sighed. "I think they get the hint." She looked past him and saw a few of the women looking rather upset. Alaric only laughed as they drove away.
Thanks for watching.